Is this shift about? It's about the Ukraine. All of this comes against the backdrop of growing questions regarding President Trump's conversation with the Ukrainian leader, as well as questions about why military aid to that very country was delayed and then later approved. Please listen to this. We are talking about nearly $400 million worth of aid that had been overwhelmingly approved by both Democrats and Republicans in Congress. And you know that is rare. That money was meant to help the Ukrainians fight Russian military aggression. But back in July, Mr. Trump decided he wanted to delay the money. Citing officials familiar with the situation, the Washington Post reported that President Trump told his acting White House chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, to pass the news on to the State Department and DOD officials on July 18th. Just 1 week later, President Trump called the Ukrainian president, a conversation that is now reportedly at the center of that whistleblower complaint. Although President Trump has admitted he did discuss Joe Biden and his son on that call, he denied any sort of quid pro quo.
Did you tell the Ukrainian leader that they would have the aid only if they investigated Joe Biden and his family?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. I did not ask for, I did not make a statement that you have to do this or I'm not going to give you aid. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that.
In fact, people familiar with this conversation told the New York Times that the president did not discuss the delay in military aid at all, even though the decision had already been made. Officials who spoke to the Washington Post say at the time, the State Department and the Pentagon were told that the president had concerns about the money and he wanted to analyze whether it really needed to be spent. But Congress appears to have been left completely in the dark. According to the Wall Street Journal, as U.S. lawmakers lobbied Mr. Trump to release the money and called officials across his administration, they kept shifting their responses. That is according to multiple interviews over the last few weeks. One of the very first media reports about the delay came out back on August 28th, nearly 6 weeks after the president decided to do it. Then in early September, Vice President Pence met with the Ukrainian president and offered this explanation.
To invest additional taxpayer dollars in Ukraine, the president wants to be assured that those resources are truly making their way to the kind of investments that will contribute to security and stability in Ukraine.
The vice president also mentioned concerns about corruption, which the president alluded to on Monday.
We're supporting a country. We want to make sure that country is honest. It's very important to talk about corruption. If you don't talk about corruption, why would you give money to a country that you think is corrupt?
Whatever the reason for the delay, it didn't last much beyond that. On September 9th, the existence of the whistleblower complaint was revealed to members of Congress. And 2 days after that, on September 11th, the money was finally released.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.